know how to tune a violin by ear? All right, I'm going to teach you real quick. Which is kind of a fun skill to learn. And when I first learned how to do it, I thought it was magic. And part of what we're doing this is to give your brains a break real quick. And then I'm going to make it make sense in the culture context in a second here. But when my instructor first suggested that I learn how to tune a violin by ear, I kind of had this idea in my head that it was like magic, like you play the note and then like in the musician's head, like they just get like a little like, da, like you hit the note, like oh that's an A, oh that's a G. So like in my head I was like, oh god, I'm gonna have to sit here and just listen to like droning A notes until I can recognize it by ear. This is gonna be the most boring thing in the world. But turns out that's not how it works, thank God. How it works is if you've ever, if y'all have ever been to like an orchestra or seen a show, they always start and you hear them all doing the so what they'll always tune first is an A. And then they tune. Does that sound familiar, right? Mm-hmm. They all tune the one and then they tune. So what they're actually listening for is the sound, the way the notes play together. So one of the really cool things about stringed instruments in particular, and the violin at the very least, is all of these notes are what we call a perfect fifth. These strings are a perfect fifth apart. So in like layman's terms, what it means is that when the sound is going into your ears, right? We all sound makes sound waves. It means the sound waves on a perfect fifth are pretty much identical. So what they're actually listening for is not whether or not they're hitting the next note. What they're listening for is whether or not the sound waves are meeting. Because when they do, the two notes almost disappear into each other. It's really kind of interesting. So if I actually, so my D and my A, right? You can almost hear it. It almost hits like a single note. It almost, but if I take the D out of tune, my instructor always says you're listening for the wah, 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 wah. As the notes start hitting against each other, you have a high hitting against a low, right? So if we listen, you can actually start to hear the...
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? So when you're tuning, you're listening for whether or not where the notes disappear into each other.
That's cool.
Isn't that really fun? What's really, really neat is that the violin is built specifically for these keys. This is the G, the D, the A, and the E. And when you get the violin in tune, because it is built, the body is built for those notes, it is much more resonant, it's much louder, it goes a lot further when it's in tune. And it's really interesting to me. So I have two violins. I have Rosa here, who I can leave out all day and not worry about if someone's gonna knock water on her or anything. She's like practically indestructible. I also have an Italian-made Cremonese violin at home. It does not leave the house because my insurance said no. Well, they said yes if you want to pay X, and I said no, we'll just leave it at home.
Yeah, we'll leave it.
But when you get Faye in tune, it goes from sounding good to like resonant. And what's really fun, this is more music nerd than y'all need to know. But we tune to two different frequencies. So here in the US, we typically tune to what's called 441. In Europe, they typically tune to 440. It's just a fraction of a note lower. Faye was made in Italy. I tune him to 440. Because when I take him to 440, that A goes from pretty to transcendent. It is the barest difference in string. And it takes it from sounding good and in tune to ringing through the whole room. The reason that I use the violin a lot of times to try and wrap up points is because it's memorable. It's a lot easier to, every time you hear an orchestra tune from now on, remember that when your culture is in tune, your wavelengths are not beating against themselves. Your music is going further. You can make a lot more happen. You can make something beautiful happen with a violin that's in tune, with a culture that's in tune. But tuning a violin is not something you do once and then you're done. In fact, I played the violin this morning and I still tuned again before I played, right? Like I check tuning. I can play in the morning and still need to tune in the afternoon. Now it doesn't take nearly as long, right? Like it's like let me just double check this real quick and let me like listen real closely and make sure that we're in tune, we're actually playing, because otherwise I'm gonna start playing a song and it's gonna sound really bad. I spend a little bit of time tuning the violin every single day. And then every so often when I go to change strings, I have to spend a lot more time tuning the violin, right? Because the strings, I get them in tune, they stretch out, but then as they rest, they stretch and they get out of tune. And I have to put a lot more time and effort and energy into tuning my culture when I've made a big change. When I have shifted things around a little bit. It's something I put a little bit of time into every day because I want my culture to beat together. I want it to go further. I want it to be more resonant. I want my people to work together. But it is also something that every so often I have to put a little bit of extra energy into. Did y'all know that even if you don't play on the violin, you're really supposed to change the strings out every 6 months? So they're supposed to last about 300 hours worth of playing, but if you don't play, you're still supposed to change the strings out. Now, I'm not saying you need to go change out all of your people every 6 months. That sounds probably counterintuitive to everything we just went over. What I am saying is that every 6 months, I'm supposed to be putting more time and energy into tuning the violin. And it's not always, in fact, let's be honest, it's like the least fun part of playing the violin. And it's also a skill set that I've had to learn. It is not something that came easily. Learning to listen. When my violin is out of tune, sometimes I don't even know if it is like flat or sharp. But sitting there and fighting with the string doesn't help. It's sitting back and listening a little bit closer. And then trying something. Trying to tighten it, trying to loosen it, moving it around. Sometimes it means going to my instructor and she'll be like, yeah, I think you're a little flat. I'm like, how do you tell that? Because she has more experience with listening, with playing. And so I'll encourage y'all to think about your culture like the strings of a violin. A little bit of work every day, a little bit of intentional work every day. And as a final analogy, one of the things that my instructor taught me very early is I always would tune by plucking. And she taught me very early, she said, Stephanie, the problem is when you tune in a way that you're not going to play, it's not going to sound quite right. You will over-tune the violin if you tune to the pits. So we have to tune to the bow. We have to tune in a way that makes our culture sing. So I will encourage y'all to keep that in mind as you walk out of here today. It doesn't have to be something you do every day, but when you do, you can make something really gorgeous happen.